This month, December 8th specifically, marks the 20th anniversary of the first game of the Yakuza or Ryuga Gotoku series. How appropriate for this game to be celebrated in December when it takes place during Christmas time. A good bit of these do, actually. You know what? Yeah, screw it. This is a Christmas story. I don't give a damn. You got the family themes, the snow, overcoming adversities with the power of love and friendship during the holiday season. This is one of my favorite video game franchises that has undoubtedly grown beyond expectations from its early humble PS2 days to the massive series it is now, with the latest entry having you play as a damn pirate. And with the new game coming out early next year, that is rather controversial right now, well, the franchise is still going with entries being made almost yearly at this rate. But today we're going to look back on the past at the original title, an ambitious game that spawned a franchise that took actually a while to get major international attention. I remember renting this game from a local video store when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure it was the most profanities I'd ever heard in a game at the time.
Stupid! Fucking motherfucker!
And I kept up with the franchise here and there, checking out titles during its PS3 days, but none of my friends really knew about it, and it just didn't seem like the series really took off in the West, not until Yakuza 0 came out. It still felt obscure during those days, especially the original when comparing to the other big hits of 2005. Since its release, Yakuza 1 has seen a remake, which is pretty much the standard that SEGA and RGG is trying to press onto players. But does that mean the original is outdated or unplayable? Well, let's run the clock back a few years and talk about this game and how it came to be. I did talk briefly about the history of this game in my video on the live action film, feel free to check that one out too. The birth of Yakuza belongs to Toshihiro Nagoshi, who dreamt of making a game that was a gritty drama with a sense of humanity. Nagoshi actually went to school studying film production, which makes a lot of sense. He ended up working for SEGA developing games such as Virtua Racing. His knowledge of film actually brought new and interesting techniques, specifically camera techniques, to SEGA during the dawn of the 3D gaming era. He didn't feel initially that he fit in with the gaming scene, but the transition to 3D actually benefited him, as it was a new concept that had so much to be explored, and many developers were scratching their heads on how to approach this. Nagoshi would work on many prominent arcade games throughout the years, from Daytona to Spike Out. And yes, he was also a director, one of three, and producer for the original Shenmue, which really is Sega's first branch out to an intense cinematic narrative RPG. It was the most expensive game ever made at the time, and unfortunately its sales didn't quite catch up with the cost to make it. I admittedly still have a lot to play with Shenmue myself. It's kind of just sitting on my shelf, but from what I have played and what I know about the games, you can definitely see the foundations of what would be incorporated into Yakuza here. Nagoshi, however, wasn't feeling that Shenmue was turning out great and asked for his own development division. At the time, it was called Amusement Vision. Mind you, Amusement Vision did technically already exist back in around 1998 under different titles, but today, we now know this as RGG Studio. So in the year 2000, Nagoshi, at the age of 35, was the president of his own gaming development team, with an interest in the new GameCube. SEGA was growing concerned at how expensive video games were getting to make, and so Nagoshi said, "Alright, let me make something really cheap and really simple that anyone could instantly pick up, since games were getting so complicated these days." And that's where Super Monkey Ball came from.
Oh, I love Super Monkey Ball.
Dude, you like Super Monkey Ball? Pim. Bro, I knew I liked you, dude. Come here, bring it in. Bring it in, brother.
Mr. Boss, that's nice.
Now, Super Monkey Ball didn't sell very well in Japan, but it did sell well internationally, which the CEO of SEGA thought, whoa, this Nagoshi guy is a genius who has the Western market in his eye. Which was not at all his intentions, but it certainly helped build up his career, as did working on F-Zero GX for the GameCube also, which got him a lot of praise. I think that finally gave him the confidence to go and do something really ambitious. Even though Monkey Ball did well in the West, Nagashi did feel some pressure with the big Western video game companies, and thus wanted to make something by Japan for Japan. RGG originally started as something marketed for the Japanese male audience. Amusement Vision ended up taking in a lot of game developers, many of which from different walks of life, different types of games that they worked on. It was a real melting pot of the gaming industry in a sense. The original concept of RGG was shut down by SEGA, but Nagashi wasn't ready to give up. He snuck in test footage in a montage of upcoming games, and the new CEO at the time, Hajime Satomi, was so impressed that they gave him the thumbs up that they needed. The development of Yakuza or RGG was incredibly personal to Nagashi. He incorporated much of his real-life experiences into this game, including the names of characters being people he knew in real life. Yes, Kiryu Kazuma was inspired by Nagoshi's real-life best friend. I'm personally very interested to know how much of the events of this game came from real-life experiences, because Nagashi claims that a lot of this was from dating and partying. This guy is fascinating as hell. Some elements of the story were directly inspired by real tragedies that Nagashi experienced. One event includes tragically when his childhood home burned down and it took the life of his grandmother. And while his parents were physically fine, his mother was so mentally traumatized by the event that she couldn't really recognize her family anymore. That is very obviously implemented into the main narrative of RGG. The development team did spend a lot of time researching host and hostess clubs and looking at locations such as Kabukicho, the real-life inspiration of Kamurocho. The development of Yakuza took about 3 years and had a budget of around 20 million USD or 2.4 billion yen. A new engine was developed for the game so that the combat would be something new and refreshing, which I'll discuss in the gameplay section. The story was broken down by 2 writing teams, one for the main plots and another for subplots. The main story was supervised by Hasei Seishu, a novelist famous for writing crime stories. Some of his novels were even adapted into films by famous directors like Takashi Miike. Seishu was an old school gamer, not fully up to date with how advanced things had gotten since Space Invaders, but the whole concept of Yakuza was really interesting to him and he jumped on it. It was Seishu who really fleshed out the story set by Nagoshi and SEGA, giving it that emotional depth that Nagoshi really wanted to bring to players. The project was finally named Ryu ga Gotoku, like a dragon. Nagoshi conceived the name as he felt dragons implied strength like our protagonist Kazuma Kiryu.
Kiryu Kazuma!
Well, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the basic story of the game. Kazuma Kiryu is a well-respected Yakuza in the Tojo clan located in Kamurocho, Tokyo. Although he was set to start off his own family branch, his life is turned upside down when his boss attempts to force himself on Kiryu's childhood friend and love interest Yumi. Kiryu's sworn brother, Nishiki, kills their boss, which you can imagine is a big no-no in the Yakuza. Kiryu accepts the blame and spends
10 years in the joint.
for a crime he did not commit, only to finally be released into the world, which is now drastically changed for the old guy. You don't actually get a lot of the backstory of the main characters in this game, but there is an interesting live-action prologue that came out more so in celebration for Yakuza 2's release. This prologue chapter details how Yumi's parents were killed, and her arrival at Sunflower Orphanage, where she meets Kiryu and Nishiki, as well as Nishiki's younger sister. We get insight on their youth growing up together as a family, and eventually Kiryu and Nishiki leaving to become Yakuza, inspired by the man backing their orphanage, Kazama. We're given this information in pieces in the main story, but there are some gaps that aren't really explored. Nishiki's sister, for example, is mentioned once in a dialogue exchange. They didn't even bother to mention her in Zero. Granted, we're given enough to infer that, yeah, she probably died to her illness, but not really giving us much to work with when we literally just met these characters. You gotta put yourself in the mindset that this is the first entry, at the time the only entry, ignoring the sequels and prequels. That's not a thing yet. You have to look at this as an isolated story. Nishiki in particular doesn't give us a whole lot to latch on to. We can understand his surface value, his jealousy of Kiryu, his feelings of insignificance, his love for Yumi for some weird reason when Reina is literally right there, bro. Fucking idiot. The story can feel pretty overwhelming for first-timers with all the characters that are introduced, and just like with Nishiki, we aren't given a lot of time to get to know them. Let alone the fact that these players may not understand how Yakuza are structured might be also greatly confusing. Truly, I do think the story is presented in such a way that it's easy to understand the power struggles. You've got the role of the chairman, it's the big boss, and then you have the little bosses that all want to be the big boss. It's climbing the power ladder. Simple enough, right? And you have your protagonist, Kiryu, who really isn't interested in such things. He's actually very contradictory to being a literal gangster. He's more so just kinda confused and trying to put his life back together. In all instances, however, he finds his past with the Tojo clan inescapable and is constantly brought back into their affairs, and in most cases is at the heart of it. Yakuza plays heavily on the theme of fate. Fate is the guiding force that may not always seem promising at the start. Kiryu was meant for some great things. Maybe he could have changed the Tojo clan. But instead, he followed his heart, which creates a wild timeline. Yumi is missing. Nishiki slicked his hair back and is the villain now. Kazuma is shot. The chairman is dead. 10 billion yen is missing from the Tojo clan, and somehow, his chance encounter with this little girl is the key to everything, which of course is also going to bring in the paternal themes into the story. Haruka is a young girl looking for her mother, Mizuki, who just so happens to be quote-unquote Yumi's sister after Yumi goes missing. Yeah, like no one saw where this was going. Kiryu, although lovingly called Uncle Kaz by Haruka, shows strong paternal feelings towards the girl and does everything in his power to protect her. And not just because he believes it will bring him closer to Yumi, but because it's a chance for the family he never got to have. Now, Chapter 6 is one that gets a lot of flack for feeling like filler, but I think it especially highlights this theme. Truthfully, the chapter may come off as a bit fillerish, maybe it kinda is, but I think it's important to the character work, which is what the game really needed. Kiryu is being helped by many people he meets along his journey. Another theme you could say, the people we meet in life and how they affect us. Most of Kiryu's friends in his old life have changed drastically or ultimately abandoned him. But then he finds a new band of allies. This includes Detective Date. The detective who was in charge of Kiryu's case and incarcerated him is now Kiryu's closest ally. Date never believed that Kiryu killed Dojima and was covering for someone, and it cost him his reputation both in career and family. However, in Chapter 6, Kiryu takes time away from his own drama to help Date, because that's the type of person he is. Date has a very strained relationship with his daughter, in which Kiryu sets both of them straight, helping Date get on the right track of being a father again while stopping his daughter from ruining her life. In the same chapter, he assists the family drama of the florist. Florist is the super informant of Kamurocho who has eyes and ears everywhere. Kiryu requires the florist's assistance in the whole Tojo affairs, which again is sidelined so that he can help their strained relationship with his son, although the florist has never actually met his son. This story with his son is actually continued through later installments. Anyway, yeah, family is a big theme here, and there's my defense case for Chapter 6. There's two ways you can really look at the story of the original Yakuza, and I absolutely adore this game, I really do. I'm a big defender of the first game's plot, but it's not perfect. Looking at it as just an isolated event, it's a fantastic spectacle. It was mind-blowing to me as a kid playing it on the PS2, but retrospectively, there are flaws. Most of the characters that should be crucial are greatly downplayed, and of course you can attribute this to the story being a mystery. I still don't think that really works that well for Nishiki though. The benefit of the prequel referring to Zero is that we can actually like Nishiki this time. But if you look at just the first game, man, the guy's a major asshole. Kiryu spent 10 years in prison just for Nishiki to become an ungrateful prick. I get the whole blinded by jealousy as a concept, but there's little redeeming factors for us as an audience to feel bad for the guy. And I love Nishiki, I really do. I think he's a great character. Not so much in this presentation, because it just feels like it's something that exists for plot convenience. Like we need a villain to tug at heartstrings, but he really doesn't. It really comes off as that shallow, being this gloomy, jealous asshole that just thinks that getting the chairman will finally make people respect him. I guess it is that simple. And don't even get me started on the main villain of the story, Jingu, a character who also just exists purely for you to hate. Also, given Haruka's age, she must have been conceived like 3 months after the whole Dojima incident. So you're telling me Kazuma just sat there and let it happen. Alright, I get it. Kazuma is not a great person. A great character, if anything. A badass gangster that's killed a lot of people. He opened an orphanage for the children of his victims. We understand now that Kazuma was reluctant to have Kiryu and Nishiki join the Yakuza. But looking at just this game, you could almost say it feels like he groomed the kids into the Yakuza. I mean, hell, if you want to really point fingers at who's to blame for all this, it could be Kazuma. Kazuma told Kiryu not to rush to save Yumi. To be fair, Kazuma knows how this world works better than Kiryu, but at the same time, it's not like your daughter, man? And he should know Kiryu well enough to know that Kiryu won't do anything, well, as drastic as Nishiki did. And then, after she loses her memory, you let her hook up with a politician? Of all people? You couldn't have at least let her hook up with like a good person? No, you chose a politician? While your beloved figurative son, Kiryu, is sitting in a jail cell? Whew. When Kazuma dies, I do not feel sad for his death. I don't, even in the remake. I just feel sad for Kiryu, because he's suffered so much. It almost feels like a sequel wasn't in mind with how many people die in Kiryu's life in this title. Almost gets to the Game of Thrones level of wondering who the hell is safe towards the end. His friends keep getting offed in the third act of the story, and it really starts to feel sadistic to poor Kiryu. And of course, everything leads up to the big final battle, the Millennium Tower. You will be hearing that sentence in most of these games. The big bad Jingu shows up finally just to be a boss battle. And I do love the contrast of his boss battle versus Nishiki's. Jingu is such a worm that he needs all his goons on his side to battle Kiryu, whereas Nishiki is a proper one-on-one battle. During the final act, it's revealed that Kiryu is the next chairman. Cool. Anywho, but the battle with Nishiki is what everybody wanted. And the chain of deaths continue. Jingu shoots Yumi, Nishiki kills Jingu, and Nishiki blows himself up. And that was really stupid. If this wasn't an exaggerated video game, they would have all died from that. And I get why Nishiki did it. I understand his perspective. Bro felt that was it for him. He had nothing left, and he was tired of being everyone's puppet. Shimano, Dojima, Kazuma, for God's sake, Jingu, the whole Yakuza, he was done with it. Over it. His final act was one that he was able to make of his own free will. It's just a miracle he didn't kill Kiryu and Haruka during. All of these deaths happened so fast throughout the game that, honestly, I think the only one that really affected me was Shinji. Yeah, and Reina too. We did get to know her more than Yumi. And the same thing with Kazuma. When Yumi dies, I'm just more so sad for Kiryu than I am for the character dying. And Haruka. I'm also sad for Haruka. It's quite heart-wrenching. Once the police arrive, Kiryu tells Date to take him back to prison because there's nothing left for him. This is where Chapter 6 cycles back as Date reminds him, who the hell's gonna take care of Haruka if you go to prison? Really dumb for Kiryu to just forget about the little girl he spent the whole game protecting right next to him, but, you know, whatever. You've got to own up to your responsibilities, which Kiryu both does and doesn't. But before that, would they really let Kiryu adopt Haruka, like, legally? I mean, he just got out of prison and really just obliterated his parole. I guess Date got a lot of power. Back to the responsibilities thing. Kiryu is both inaugurated and resigns as chairman in the same day. So who does get to be the big boss after all of this? That guy. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess it couldn't have been Majima, so sure. I mean, I probably would have chose Kashiwagi myself. Terada is someone of much more importance in the later games, but in this one, he's the guy. I haven't really said anything about Majima yet, have I? For perhaps the most famous character of the franchise, he's a real oddity in this one. Majima's significance in RGG1 is strange. He's definitely not the same character you think of him today. I will say though, the McKay film definitely amplified his psychotic side. He's got a few goofy moments, but overall he's still a very blank slate. He's actually a really mysterious guy in the original. He pops up a few times, goes from sinister to unpredictable. That's one trait that really hasn't changed for him. For God's sake, he's a pirate now.
I thought I heard the old man say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her."
Majima is memorable in Yakuza 1 for different reasons than he is in the sequels. The guy really is a mad dog, and in the original, he actually does lean more towards being an evil character. He does most certainly kidnap a child, and, well, at the same time, he is someone who appreciates honesty. Majima stands out more than the other villains, although you do have to give Yakuza some credit. Even with characters as bland as Shimano or other villains, their designs, mannerisms, and characteristics are enough to make them actually memorable. I wouldn't call them the best written characters by any means, or even the best utilized, but I'll be damned if I call them forgettable. In the end, I think RGG1's story is really neat. It works best on its own, but looking at the larger franchise, there's certainly better stories out there. I think I would even, call me crazy, but I would even argue that Yakuza 2 is a little bit more interesting. You know what? I don't care. I don't. Yakuza 2 is a better game than the first one. You can quote me on that, but that's a topic for another day. I wouldn't exactly say it's the worst story in the series either, although a big problem for Western fans was the English localization.
Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry, but you can't bring children in here.
It's a social studies field trip.
Yeah, this one's a real oddball. If you recall, Nagoshi wanted to make a game that truly embodied Japanese culture. Safe to say, not everything would have translated well for Western audiences. Yeah.
You think I'm a fucking idiot? Look at you, fuckhead! You couldn't be any more Yakuza if you tried. You fucking Yakuza! Don't fuck with Kazuki-san!
How many times I gotta tell you, I'm not Yakuza. You retarded or just deaf?
Well, it's not subtle. The game is completely dubbed over in English with a kind of crazy voice cast. Mark Hamill plays Majima, which I honestly actually really adore.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh. Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
Michael Madsen, rest in peace, plays Shimano.
So, Chairman, what's the reason for this meeting on such short notice?
And that also kind of fits in its own way. But then again, I might just be showing favoritism there. And Kiryu's dub voice also kind of fits. It's, well, for one thing, if the script was better, obviously, and if the performance was just directed better.
Don't worry. I can take care of this. I'm gonna get you to Yumi no matter what. I won't let you down.
Thanks. Go get him, Uncle Kazuma.
So you ready for me? Then step the fuck up. It's time to die.
You'll also notice that Kiryu's Japanese voice actor, Takaya Kuroda, who has played the character since 2005, does sound a bit lighter in this one compared to how we know him in the later games, as if he's still himself trying to find this character. And I'm not saying it's a bad performance, not at all. I'm just saying that, you know, this is the first time playing the character, the first time bringing him to life, and he's still trying to kind of find that compared to how we hear the character today.
その答え、俺に少しの間預からせてもらえないでしょうか。俺が必ずけじめをつけてお答えに上がります。その答え、俺に少しの間預からせてもらえないでしょうか。俺が必ずけじめをつけてお答えに上がります。
Needless to say that the entire Japanese cast is freaking phenomenal. Other voices include Michael Rosenbaum as Nishiki.
10 years in the joint made you a fucking pussy!
I can't believe Lex Luthor said that. Bill Farmer, Goofy from Disney, is Date. Debbie Derryberry, aka Jimmy Neutron, is Haruka. Eliza Dushku is Yumi. Rachel Lee Cook is Reina. Roger Jackson, Ghostface, is Kazuma. And very, very interestingly, Gary Buster Holmes is voiced by Gary Anthony Williams. Yes, Uncle Ruckus. You know, on paper, the cast sounds awesome, actually. That script is something else. The profanity, for one, has been boosted to 1,000. It's gratuitous, to say the least. There's a fuck or a shit in nearly every sentence, amongst other things. It also seems as though many of the cast were confused about what they were doing. I love Rosenbaum to death, but I think he might have been drunk recording these lines.
Didn't want to lose to you again, Kazuma.
The dub is mostly remembered in memes, being made fun of these days. Most of the current fandom didn't really show up until the PS4 era anyway, and probably haven't experienced this in its entirety. Well, let's just be grateful we live in an era where you can play this fully translated in the original Japanese language with a fan patch now. But back then, this was all we had. It's not a good dub. I can't say it's the worst I've ever heard. I prefer playing these games in Japanese anyway. The beautiful thing is that we now live in a time where you have the option to choose between dub or sub. But I guess because the dub was so poorly received in the original game that they actually didn't bother making another one until Judgment. The gameplay of the original RPG is quite interesting. Combat, of course, is a big thing, as this is an action title. The combat in Yakuza 1 is clunky. For one thing, the camera movement is indeed a nightmare, which can definitely be to your disadvantage, such as the lock-on button that does not actually lock onto your enemy. It's very easy to get trapped in a combo aiming at the complete opposite direction that your enemy is at. There's not really a good way to cancel out of that before you get smacked in the back either. It's actually better not to lock onto enemies because then you can actually hit behind you. And of course, as you play along, you'll upgrade your abilities and this becomes a lot less tedious. Clunkiness aside, it's still a lot of fun. It's simple to learn, fun to master. You can string together easy combos, grab enemies, or even more fun, grab weapons. You want to talk about street fights? You could pick up damn near anything and use it to beat up opponents. Most of which has been memed in the Yakuza community by this point. There's actually a statue you can get of Kiryu about to decimate someone with a bicycle. Which brings me to heat. Heat is a big thing in this series. Heat is your MP, your energy to do special attacks. You have a heat gauge that you can fill up from basic attacks or dodging, blocking, taunting. With this, you can grab enemies and obliterate them in so many different cruel ways. As you play more, you will unlock more abilities and heat actions. These heat actions are relevant to the environment or weapons. There are loads of fun heat actions in this game, but the franchise will most certainly go crazy down the line. The soundtrack is also flat out amazing. I think that it's usually always agreed that the music in these games are great. The soundtrack was composed by Hidenori Shoji, who has collaborated on most of Nagoshi's projects as well as other SEGA games. He's basically done the score for almost all the RGG games. It makes the ass-kicking so much more thrilling with the funky OSTs backing it up. My personal favorite is the Shimano battle theme. Although I definitely prefer the Receive You rendition in Kiwami. The soundtrack may feel a little bit limited in this one, however, you'll be hearing a lot of tracks recycled, and in some cases, it may not always feel appropriate. Who's gonna complain with a score as awesome as this one? The game does embody classic RPG elements. You have your large map to free roam, which includes random battles as well as side stories. The side stories, for the most part, are non-canon outside of some that are continued in the sequels. They're mostly lighthearted or fun, with some being rather dark or just plain simple. You can beat up a dine and dasher, pickpockets, or you could help a boxer who's forced to throw a game, to rig the bets, stop a man from killing himself because of his gold digger girlfriend. Look at the dark side of the gambling world and debt collection. You can also teach phone scammers a lesson or protect civilians from stalkers. You could buy a bag of a woman's used underwear for a man. Huh. Damn, Nagashi, what was your youth like? Sub-stories are one of the most famous aspects of these games. Each entry is filled with funny or emotionally deep side stories that add extra playtime to your game. And after you complete every side story, you unlock the secret boss Amon, who is, in most entries, is supposed to be the hardest boss of each game, meant to truly test your skills, although you can just cheese him in this title. One major concern of this game is that side stories are missable. You do most of them in certain chapters, or else you'll miss them and have to start the game all over again, assuming you don't have backup saves. And it's not exactly like the map shows you where they all are. You gotta just hope that you find them when they're available, unless you have a guide. Also connected with sub-stories are the hostesses. This is a mini-game where Kiryu can go to cabaret clubs and rizz up some hostesses, wasting your money buying expensive drinks, foods, and gifts. While the love of his life is out there fighting for her own survival, he can be out getting some on the side. Needless to say, these aren't canon, but they all technically end in sub-stories. Which also brings me to mini-games, another one of the big famous aspects of these titles. Although Yakuza 1 is the least amount compared to other games, hell, there isn't even mahjong in this one. Minigames should be something for the player to partake in to get a bit of that virtual Tokyo nightlife experience. Batting cages, slots, claw machines, or the underground casino with blackjack, baccarat, roulette. These games could be a real thrill and nightmare for completionists like myself. I have too many hours getting all these plats, and I still have some to get. Yakuza 1 doesn't have a traditional completion list. Yakuza 2 is actually the first game to do so. So many games aren't exactly a requirement, although there are sub-stories tied to them. The most diabolical is Haruka's Trust. When you're free roaming with Haruka, you can bring her to different places to fill her happiness meter. Doing so will give you rewards. For the most part, it's not too bad, except for the last two requests. One is to get 3,000 medals and slots. Not impossible, it just takes a while. But the last one, that is to hit all 20 home runs in a row, a perfect game on the hardest difficulty in the batting cages. It's all timing, that's all it is, but my god, all you have to do is miss one ball, and that's it. You gotta do it all over again, all 20 in a row. It's not fun. I have probably 2 hours of footage just of me failing this over and over again. I despise this. I hate this more than the pachinko in Yakuza 5. I hate this just as equally as the pool in Yakuza 3 Remastered, where the 60 FPS made the minigame near unplayable. It ass sucks so much. And just wait till you see the 100% completion for the next game. God. The map is also a core of the game. Kamurocho based off Kabukicho, which does really faithfully recreate the iconic locations of said areas, which is also really fun for non-Japanese players to get that immersive virtual experience of exploring these places without having to actually get into, real street fights or other shenanigans. I think the map of Kamurocho is the perfect size. You could take taxis for fast travel, or you could just run around the whole thing in a few minutes. It doesn't take that long to get to where you need to be. The free roam utilizes fixed camera angles, which don't really get nearly as tedious as other games. The in-game map gives you lots of restaurants you can go and refill your health by eating, or going to the bars to drink real licensed alcoholic beverages. God, I love Suntory. There's also licensed locations like Don Quixote or the SEGA arcades, which adds nice extra layers of realism to the immersion. Apparently, they tried to get even more places, but not everyone was keen on the initial project of RGG. You've got konbinis in every corner, bikini bars, adult DVD stores with hidden weapon shops behind it, or a hidden casino underneath a ramen shop. A lot of these aren't found through the story either, but through exploration or making the right choices in sub-stories, making them potentially missable. So it's pretty cool actually to have some of those hidden locations. These games are so chock full of activities that you almost always have something to do. These titles make sure you get your money's worth in time. RGG 1, however, is still the shortest, and my recent 100% run was done in about 12 hours. And I use the term 100% loosely since there isn't really a completion list. Oh yeah, the Coliseum, that's another big thing I guess. Battle minigame, you could call it, in the franchise, where you have several different tournaments, usually with different rules and conditions, battling opponents for rewards like XP or items. It's not a whole lot of incentive in this particular title as there are in the later games. There are some cool sections that change things up, like long battles, which have you battling waves of enemies and lengthy segments throughout different maps. Or the car shootout, which is not perfect, but also really funny considering all the people that Kiryu just shot to death. The game did release outside of the PS2, although limitedly. There was the HD Remaster that released around the same time as Yakuza 5 in a bundle with Yakuza 2 for PS3. This remaster only came out in Japan, sadly. I guess because of sales, or maybe the lack of interest translating the game again. I don't know, but PS3 is region free. You can buy a copy of the game and play it, and still even get the trophies too. But the game is entirely in Japanese, so be aware of that. The remaster is a bit of a mixed bag. Visually, it looks great. The main thing was changing the game to 16:9 aspect ratio, which looks incredible on widescreen TVs. I don't think the in-game textures look as great as upscaling them on PCSX though. The UI and text all look much clearer, but the audio, weirdly enough, isn't very good. I mean, just listen to this.
見とったで、桐生ちゃん。兄貴、桐生ってそうや、堂島のり、桐生一馬ちゃんや。
お久しぶりです。
Yeah, I don't know what that's about, but it's constant throughout the remaster. I haven't played RGT2 Remaster yet, so I don't know if it's the same issue or not. It's really weird and annoying. Of course, the main addition is trophies, which give you more completion goals for the game, such as defeating a certain amount of enemies, or defeating them in certain ways, or just bumping into people 1,000 times. Now, what's really fascinating about the HD Remaster is that the bundle also released on the Wii U. This was the first time a Yakuza title released on a platform different than the PS2. And it was the last time until 2018. And this was the last Nintendo release for the series until Kiwami on the Switch in 2024. From 2013 to 2024. The Wii U version sold colossally bad. And it doesn't help that SEGA was testing the waters with one of Nintendo's lesser successful consoles, and I'm a Wii U defender. I love this thing, I really do. Now, it's unlikely we'll see another remaster for this title or a localization of it because, well, SEGA just cares about the remakes now. 2016, Yakuza 1 was remade with the same engine as Yakuza 0 or 5. The base story script is practically identical, which actually makes the story feel a little weird when looking back at the prequel, or even the later installments. Some things feel a little bit contradictory in the character work for Kiryu and Majima especially. After all, they added a whole minigame of Majima helping Kiryu train up by constantly stalking him and hiding in weird places. Also battling Kiryu in different Majima personas. He's just a silly Billy until he's not. And this.
何よ。
その辺で
One of the big things Kiwami added was extra lore for Nishiki. Some fans are divided on this, but I personally find it incredibly necessary, because this resolves all of my problems I had with how the character was presented in the original game. We get it now. Add this with the extra context of Yakuza 0. God, I miss him. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here comparing every difference between the two versions. I really do love them both. Sure, the OG has more details, kinda, mainly just in Kiryu's facial expressions. But Kiwami also adds his fair share of mini-games, extra lore, quality of life improvements, and the game just looks beautiful. And as great as the RGG engine is that they use now, I really think that Zero and Kiwami are just visually glorious titles. Now the big thing. Is Yakuza still worth visiting 20 years later? I do have a lot of nostalgic memories for this game, but I also think that if you're a fan of the series and you're committed to checking out all of the different titles, I really do encourage you to play the original. Not in an argument of whether or not it's better or worse than the remake, and not just because it's the first one. On its own, it's still genuinely a good game. It may feel lackluster if you're looking with the entire franchise in perspective, but as its own beast, you can really feel the ingenuity of the developers, and it's a real passion project with the intention of making something different, unique, and above all else, something fun. And ultimately, I do still think the original game is fun. It can get on your nerves at times, but damn, I'd even argue it's one of the best games of 2005. And 2005 is one of the best years of gaming. So 20 years later, yeah, Yakuza still kicks ass. If you haven't already, give it a shot. Did you guys play this one back in the day, or did you hop on it later? Let me know how you feel about this title and what your first entry to the RGG series was. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, support the channel, that little bell too for notifications on new releases. Also be sure to hit up my socials, Twitter and X, to keep up with whatever nonsense I'm ranting about. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.